Well, good afternoon. So joining me today is Dr. David James. He is a superintendent of Akron Public Schools here in the city of Akron, and he is one of the leaders involved in our Imagine Impact campaign. And we're so pleased that Dr. James could join us today in this video series that we are launching as we restart and relaunch our Imagine Impact campaign. We're going to tell you more about that as well. But Dr. James, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So I have some questions that I'll just ask, and if we can just have a conversation, I think that would be fantastic.
Sure.
These are certainly all related to housing and education, being that that is your area of expertise. So first question is, Dr. James, what does home mean to you?
Wow. So, the house that I grew up in, my parents have been in that house for almost 60 years. They moved into that house the year I was born. And my parents still live in that house. So, for me, there's always been, memories of warmth, security, safety, fun. And yes, I did get in trouble a couple of times growing up. So, but the whole thing around family and having a stable place to live, I think is very important, particularly today in the lives of our young people.
Well, thank you. 60 years they've lived there. That is fantastic. That's fantastic. And I know you went to Cleveland State, but did you grow up here in the Akron community?
I actually grew up in Cleveland.
In Cleveland. Very good. So when we made the call to you initially to be a part of our Imagine Impact campaign and talking about the goals of building more houses over the next 5 years, why did you say yes? What made you say, yep, I'll be a part of this?
Well, again, I think it goes back to my experiences growing up and seeing some of the issues that many of our families have. When I talk to our people with our Project Rise program about, our homeless population, and, it really does break your heart when you hear the stories of what people have to go through today and they don't have a stable living place. They don't have those stable relationships. I think, a house, stable living arrangements is part of that equation to provide a home. A home can be many things, but, having that place where you can go and, have that refuge, I think is really important. It's important to the educational process because I think those stable living environments enable kids to focus on what they should be doing in school instead of worrying about where they're going to sleep, things like that.
Yeah, you talk about, the stable living environment for children, and with everything going on with, stay-at-home orders and school going virtual toward the end of last school year and remaining virtual. I think Akron Public Schools may still be on that first 9 weeks being virtual. How is that impacting, kids? Maybe they don't have ready internet service, or they don't even have a computer at home to be online.
Yeah, so lucky for our Akron Public Schools students, we went, with 100% devices for all of our students. So they all have a device, a Chromebook. And for those families that have reached out to us who have issues with internet, we've arranged for, hotspots to be loaned out for those families that were having some serious issues. But again, when it comes to, kids being at home or, whether that's an apartment, a house or at grandma's house or an aunt's house or a neighbor's, I think building up our neighborhoods with those, with stable housing, that helps us deliver education in this very difficult time where, we're virtual for the first 9 weeks. And I know that's difficult, but I think that's really the importance of, stable neighborhoods and stable living situations for, people who have kids in school.
The houses that we launched this campaign with are right across the street from Innis Community Learning Center, where you recorded your portion of our Imagine Impact video.
Yes.
And we've had the pleasure now of meeting some of the teachers from Innis. They have come over and done some build days over the last several weeks. And, you know, they were grateful, they said, to get a chance to get out of the classroom or the, you know, just the stress and the pressure of planning all the online lessons, you know, that they have to get ready for. So tell me a little bit about that, the impact on the teachers too, for how they're handling things, and you know, how they're maintaining those personal connections to their students. You know, because we know, you know, kids spend so much time with their teachers, you know, during each and every day, and they have those close bonded relationships. So how's this affecting the teachers and the administrators and principals? And
Well, I mean, it's a difficult situation because, you know, many of us aren't really used to these connections, you know, through a virtual means with students. You know, students aren't really there present physically. And you know, teachers do have great relationships with, you know, our students, and it's very difficult for them to deal with that. But it's better than not having that connection at all. I think, you know, the majority of our teachers were really excited when we rolled out, you know, the training for the virtual classrooms and things that they do. I'm not saying it's easy, because it isn't, but many of them were happy that they would at least have that face time, you know, with their classes of students, so they can at least have that connection. But this is all uncharted territory. No one's written a book on this yet, but I'm sure a lot of books will be written after we're done, you know, with this pandemic. But they've, you know, they've really taken to it and have done a lot of creative things to really engage the kids through this virtual, you know, instructional delivery method.
yeah, and even all the buildings themselves, they're community learning centers, and you know, that are open to the community for various activities and events, and that's not happening either. So you know, it's got to be just as stressful, you know, on the, you know, the maintenance staff and those that are in charge of the community learning center piece of it. So you know, you said, you know, when this pandemic is over, so do you, as our school superintendent, do you see an end in sight anytime soon for the schools?
Well, you know, I see an end in sight, but I don't think that end is going to include us conquering the COVID-19 virus. I think we're going to have to learn how to live with the virus. I mean, even if, you know, a vaccine is developed, or when a vaccine is developed, it doesn't mean that, you know, that vaccine will cure you. It'll be similar to the flu vaccine, I'm pretty sure, where, you know, you have to get it every year and you can still catch the flu. So I think moving forward, we're going to have to really be vigilant and making sure that we're still, you know, doing the sanitation things of washing our hands and, you know, covering our sneezes, and maybe even continuing to wear masks. You know, a lot of it will remain to be seen over the next several months as we go into flu season and figure out, you know, where we're going with that. But I think our world has really changed, you know, forever in terms of how we're approaching, you know, education, how we're approaching our community learning centers, and how we're just, you know, approaching student learning and family engagement.
Well, thanks for those perspectives on the pandemic and on COVID and how it's affected kids. So we'll go ahead and move on from that topic, because we know it gets talked about on a daily basis. So so a question I have for you is around research, you know, and what it shows about a person's access to opportunity being directly linked to the community where they live. While we know this is something that LeBron James is very focused on with, you know, his school program with Akron Public Schools, and you know, now with the new opportunities for living spaces for families pretty close to the school itself. So you know, it is linked to the community where they live. So you know, our Imagine Impact campaign aims to build up our community. You know, the goals are to build 75 new homes over the next 5 years. How do you see that growth being a part of how it affects children in our community?
Well, you know, I think, you know, number one is we look at, you know, serving on the board of United Way and looking at a lot of the basic needs, and serving on the board of the Greater Akron Chamber, you know, I can see how, you know, education, economic development and, just community prosperity all come together. And, housing is a very important aspect of that, and having stable neighborhoods. Having a stable neighborhood, I think you get more people to get involved in the community. And people have more of a shared experience. And so I think, going through this initiative and looking at building 75 homes with everything else that's going on in our community, looking at job creation and more equity issues around employment, looking at meeting basic needs, I think will go a long way in helping to stabilize, neighborhoods within our community. And a stable neighborhood helps kids adjust, and I think we have less problems in school with kids, like with different behaviors and things like, and anxiety and trauma. If we have, more stable partnerships, such as the one with Habitat for Humanity and building these homes and trying to stabilize communities. Because, kids with trauma, will come to school with a lot of issues, and it makes it very difficult for those kids to learn.
Yeah. So with that in mind too, let's talk a little bit about, from a psychological perspective, how does that affect the kids' self-esteem and their self-worth? And, when they, do have a stable living environment versus when they don't.
I mean, I can only go by my experience, and, growing up, never experienced a utility shut off. And it wasn't that, we were a rich family. There were 4 kids, in basically a 3-bedroom house, and so, but you had time to dream, you had time to, enjoy, life. And I mean, everyone on the street, their parents worked, and none of us were rich, but, we enjoyed the things that, I guess I'm aging myself, we play touch football in the street, or baseball or basketball, and, ride our bikes or build go-karts and things like that. So, I just think when you have that kind of environment, I think kids can thrive. And if you don't have that environment, then you bring in a lot of other factors that can put a lot of kids at risk. And that's why this work is so important.
You mentioned, growing up as a child. So do you have some memories of your studying habits in your childhood home? Did you build a fort and do your homework under the fort blankets? And
Well, yeah. So every time we have a family get together, my dad will laugh when we bring up the memory of, like, in the winter, I would build, either a snowman or try to build some kind of snow castle yard. And I'd take his tools outside and I would leave them there. And then when the snow melted in the spring, he'd find half of his tools in the backyard. And he'd be so angry with me, for doing that. But it's things like that, or, I mean, it's just, things that kids do. But, there were, it was, I'm not saying everything was like this idyllic situation. Everyone has problems, but, I just don't have a whole lot of bad memories, of growing up, because again, it's different when you've been in that, from the time you enter kindergarten through high school and then going away to college and coming back. And then even now, I'm my own family, and then, taking my kids to my parents' house. It's like, we did that with my grandparents, they all, had stable living arrangements. So it's something that we just grew up with. And I think it gives a certain perspective. It gives you a center, when you have that home to go to consistently.
so as being involved over the years with Habitat, it involves the family being involved in sweat equity. So
Yes.
that's a Habitat coined term and phrase, and it's a cornerstone of our project that the family is involved in their build. They build alongside our volunteers. They do hours at their house site. They have homeowner education classes where they learn. So how do you think that physical investment into that process helps a family, and having their children be able to have some input in that? How does that, do you think, as the parents go through the process of sweat equity, what do you think that impact is on their kids?
Well, I think it's important for people to have a hand in their success, or, I would compare it to growing a garden. So last weekend I was, taking all of my tomatoes and making marinara and spaghetti sauce. Okay. I've made, salsa. I made all kinds of stuff, pickles. And I think there's a sense of pride when you put your hands on something and had a part in its growth and development, or building it or constructing it. And so when families put that sweat equity into a home project. I remember some years ago when we were working on the house on, I think it was Thornton Street.
I think it was on Johnston. Yes.
There you go, Johnston.
Yes.
Yes. And, I remember hanging the John. It wasn't even a house for me, but I felt good, and I had some pride in helping them hang the drywall in that house for the family that was moving in there. And I think that is really a great thing when people can take part in that. And then I think it gives them a sense of belonging and ownership, that hey, I helped build this house. So I think it's a whole, when you have something of your own, you take a different approach to it, and taking care of it, and particularly when you've had a part in constructing it.
Yeah. So one of the questions I have, as far as how we had talked a few minutes ago about the teachers and their personal connections to the kids, and of course Akron Public Schools has school psychologists and so forth. So how does the district, or how does Akron Public Schools as a district make some connections, with housing service partners, when teachers identify specific behaviors in students, or things that they may believe are housing impactful related issues? So how does the team kind of help kids and make connections to the families, and then branch those connections out to the service partners in the community?
Right. Some of that will come from, interactions, between the kid or maybe their parent or guardian and the teacher, and then that might get passed along to a counselor. But with some of our partners, we're taking a different approach. So like with United Way, we have family resource centers at Helen Arnold, at Robinson, and then we'll have another one in the Kenmore Garfield cluster, where families can come directly to the school and work with the family resource center staff. So if there is an issue with housing, or some other basic need, they can work with us and United Way and get that need met. Many of the partners that work with our kids, whether it's through a mentoring relationship with another provider, or even with some of our mental health providers that will come into the schools and work with families. Or a perfect example is what happens at the I Promise School with the LeBron James Family Foundation. That's probably like the blue ribbon approach to that, where they have people on site who really deal directly with the families and can refer them to the various services that are available in the community. And to me, we have to move more to that approach. I think the problem with our organization is that we've been used to doing everything ourselves for so long, that now there are, experts in the community at that, like Habitat for Humanity and others, who can really work more directly with those. And so typically what we're doing is, when we know there's a need, if it's housing or food insecurity, whatever it is, we're going to refer that family, to the organization that could best help them, and kind of eliminate us as being the middleman and all that. And that's how I think we can make a better impact, by recognizing that we all play a role. We all touch the same families, but we all have different areas of expertise. but they do all contribute to, I think, a well-adjusted, healthy family, which helps my students become less traumatized and better apt to be able to have academic success and growth.
Sure. So, what would you say, Dr. James, to donors or potential donors or those interested in getting involved in Habitat or in our mission? What draws you to be involved over the years that you have?
I really think it's about, building up our community. So, anyone who owns a business in Akron, who, us with educating, our future workers and leaders, all of that goes into the pot to help create a successful community. So I would say whatever you can do, whether it's writing a check and donating or giving your time and hanging drywall like I did, on a Habitat site, encourage, whether it's you as a owner or your employees, encourage, that volunteerism to help make Akron a better community.
So, knowing that you have a retirement coming up, as I have heard, how do you plan to continue, your support of this maybe campaign then over the next 5 years as we keep moving? And I mean, we're sad that you're retiring. I think you have quite a legacy with Akron Public Schools. My 15 years here at Habitat for Humanity of Summit County, and prior to that, my 7 years at the Akron Urban League, being able to kind of interact with you over my professional career, you have quite the legacy here in Akron. So, I mean, we can help you. We can put a hammer in your hand or a drywall screw gun, whatever you might want to do. But how do you plan to maybe stay involved and be active after your retirement?
Well, I mean, I'll still be serving on some of the boards that I serve on here, and I'll certainly, help, deliver the message as I have in the past, and even, talk with my board about how, our employees can get a little bit more involved and do more of that volunteer work to actually help build those 75, homes throughout our community.
We would absolutely love those volunteers. It's the lifeblood of how every single home is built.
Yes.
And quite honestly, building in the city of Akron has become much more attractive with the real estate tax abatement that's available here in the city. Now, while I know those real estate tax abatements might not necessarily help the school funding scenario, it does, become appealing to those low to moderate income families that qualify for Habitat. Yes. Because their mortgage payment will be significantly less for those first 15 years. And so, our available land, just like the project on East Avenue, that's 8 new homes built in the city that will appraise for, $130,000 to $150,000. The families will have that 0 interest mortgage. And that's 8 new families that their children will just walk right across the street to go to school at Innis when they're in those grades. They've got Prentice Park right there to be able to play at, the ice cream stand that's there, the active grocery store with a bank inside, access to the highway. So that project, as it started to come to life, it just, the amenities are there.
Mm-hmm.
The amenities are there in many of our Akron neighborhoods. And, we just want families to be able to continue to make Akron, where they want to live versus, considering I don't want to be in the city. I want to move outside of the city.
Right.
What do you see some of the, the positives? What would you tell our families when they're looking to pick the piece of property they build at? Why should they pick Akron?
Well, I mean, I think there are a lot of amenities in Akron. As you just mentioned, virtually almost all of our schools, our CLCs, are new. And there's a lot of exciting things going on. And as you mentioned, some of the financial benefits, and yes, there's always kind of a mixed bag with, property tax abatement, but, income tax is just as important, because income tax is paying off the bonds that were used to pay the local share of building the community learning center. So we've had to kind of change our thinking. But all of those things, go into the mix when trying to, build up your community. When you look at many of the things that are going on downtown, out in some of our neighborhoods, it's a very attractive city, and the cost of living isn't as bad as it is, in other places. And so I think many of our neighborhoods are walkable, and as you said, with a lot of amenities that are close by. So it really is, I think, a great place to build a home and raise a family.
And I think if I heard correctly, there was the report last week that the graduation rate for Akron Public School students was at an all-time high. Let's
Yes.
talk about that a little bit too.
Exactly, because of our work with college and career academies. And I think that's another important aspect of getting an education here in Akron, is that our students are getting a head start with whatever career they want to go into, because we have virtually many of our largest employers tied up with partnerships with us, and many small employers. And then our relationships with our universities, Stark State, Kent State University of Akron, and several others that are providing opportunities for our kids. And so don't forget, we also have our Innovation Generation Scholarship. So for a student who graduates from an Akron Public High School and attends University of Akron, they meet some criteria on GPA, ACT score, and SAT score, they could get, it's the last dollar scholarship, so they could pay, for their tuition after grants and other non-loan aid is considered. So that's, there's a lot of pluses to, living in this community that, maybe we can do a better job of communicating that. But there are a lot of pluses to the city of Akron and living here and raising a family.
For sure. Well, Dr. James, I deeply appreciate your time, not only today. I appreciate your time in helping us get this Imagine Impact campaign off the ground. Next 5 years, again, building 75 homes. We'll aim to repair 150 homes, keeping them warm, safe, and dry for families that are currently living in them. We will impact 1,000 lives, and we will mobilize 10,000 volunteers to make a difference, including our Akron Public Schools teachers and our newly retired superintendent of Akron Public Schools. So anything else you'd like to add today before we close?
No, I'd just like to thank you for all the wonderful work that you've done and your dedication to improving our community. It's really appreciated.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful afternoon.
All right, you too.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to our discussion with Dr. David James. Mark your calendar for our next discussion with Nick Browning from Huntington National Bank on October 14th at noon. In this video, we will discuss the importance a stable job plays in making affordable housing possible for families in our community. To learn more about our Imagine Impact campaign, visit hfhsummitcounty.org/Imagine Impact.